Welcome back. This is Sansad TV. It's interim budget day, and we have two very special guests for you right now. Mr. V. Anantha Nageshwaran, the Chief Economic Advisor to the government, and Sanjay Malhotra, the Revenue Secretary. Mr. Malhotra, I have to start with you because in budget day is always the day when we ask the Revenue Secretary all sorts of questions about taxation and what's gone up and what's gone down. A bit simpler this year, I dare say, because there've actually been no movement in taxes. So perhaps I will ask you about the buoyancy that we are seeing, which is also quite remarkable tax buoyancy across the board.
Yes, and we need to thank, both the taxpayers and the tax authorities, and especially, the way we have used technology over the years. It's starting to pay rich dividends for us. So the economy is set to grow at a rate of 8.9% this year, whereas the tax revenues are expected to grow at 12.5%. So this is a buoyancy of 1.4. Similarly, next year again, we expect the taxes to go at higher rate than the GDP. And so we are projecting a buoyancy of 1.1. And as I mentioned, this is again, because of better use of technology, use of third-party data, making, taxation simpler. And this is, as the Honorable Finance Minister also mentioned, this is despite the reduction in the tax rates. We had witnessed a corporate tax rate reduction in the year 2019 when it was brought down to 22%. And then similarly, we have now the new taxation scheme for the personal income tax, where the tax rates have been reduced, and moreover, it has been simplified without taxes, without exemptions and deductions.
Mr. Malhotra, two related questions to that. Are we, A, seeing in India some sort of a Laffer curve that you bring tax rates down, you make them moderate, and then people don't mind paying, they're happy to come forward and pay? And B, if you trust the taxpayer, you make it simple for them to pay taxes, you have faceless assessment, there's less harassment, again, they're happy to come forward and pay, and compliance actually goes up the easier it becomes to pay your taxes. Are we seeing those two effects actually playing themselves out, in which case it could be a virtuous cycle that we are seeing?
You are partly right. I mean, yes, of course, reduced taxation and tax rates have helped. But at the same time, our focus on the use of technology and our use of third-party data, that is also helping. We now have, the GST, which is now integrated tax. It's simple, multitude of taxes being replaced, by one tax. And moreover, digital. So that gives us the visibility as to what is happening on the GST and how, it is feeding into the income tax, and similarly, the income tax data feeding into the GST. So the use of digital data, you would have yourself, seen when you pay your tax returns. They are now pre-filled, and they are pre-filled with data from third-party sources, which you may not even sometimes, be aware of. So all these things have helped. Of course, reduced taxes also, I do believe, would have helped to some extent.
Right. Mr. Nageshwaran, if I can come to you on the broad picture that you're seeing unfolding on the time when the interim budget is being tabled. It's a bit of a report card on the last 10 years and a look ahead at the next 5 years or the next period. How do you see the overall picture right now of the Indian economy? Any key highlights you'd like to draw attention to, both from the review and the budget itself?
That's right. I think, the budget reflects the optimism that the review also carried with it. Because we have done the hard work in the last 3-4 years post-COVID, and also pre-COVID, more importantly. The very fact that we could handle COVID with confidence and come out of it stronger at the other side is because of the hard work done between 2014 and 2019 in terms of financial inclusion. The Prime Minister Jan Dhan Yojana, the Aadhaar, and the direct benefit transfer, the repair of balance sheets of the banking sector, particularly public sector banks. banks, and the creation of insolvency and bankruptcy code and the introduction of GST. All these things have played a part, and the lagged effects of these reforms, and also the emphasis on infrastructure, which boosts the supply side of the economy so that our economic growth could turn into a marathon rather than a sprint. So all these things are reflected in the budget's confidence in laying out a strategy for Viksit Bharat by 2047.
When you look at the infrastructure spending, which clearly is showing no signs of slowing down, another 11 lakh crores that year, the spending that we are doing on that without yet allowing the fiscal deficit to go out, in fact, there's fiscal consolidation that's happening now. Is it a case of when you fix the supply side, when you get infrastructure, when you sort out logistics, you are in a sense crowding in a lot of private investment also potentially and helping the private sector grow as well?
That's absolutely right. I think the reason why the government took up capital expenditure massively from 2018 onwards is because if you go back to the last decade, private sector balance sheets were in bad shape. They were shedding assets and reducing debt. Banks were unwilling to lend except to the most creditworthy borrower of the economy, which is the government. But now, post-COVID, the government continued to invest in infrastructure because it had to boost the supply side. But now, the rate of growth of capex on the part of the government naturally is slowing because of the high base, and also partly because the private sector now has such built-up enormous financial strength, and banks are beginning to lend as well, as you see in the credit growth data. So that is the reason why I think the government's efforts in boosting supply side comes not just from the infra spending, but also in the various other measures taken, such as the introduction of a nationwide tax and the insolvency and bankruptcy code, financial inclusion, and also social infrastructure in terms of creating the number of educational institutions across different fields, medicine, management, law, universities, and so on and so forth, is all about ensuring that land, labor, capital, including digital infrastructure, become factors of production, boosting the ability of the economy to grow at good rates for a longer period.
Right. Mr. Malhotra, if I could come back to you with a couple of tax-related questions. Number one, if you're looking at the estimates, it's sounding as if income tax, you're expecting income tax to grow perhaps faster than some of the other taxes. What would be the reason for that? And B, on the question of GST, the fact that we are seeing, very good buoyancy in GST, do you think part of the roadmap ahead would be further simplification of GST, maybe reducing the slabs or moving in that direction?
Yeah, so income tax, personal income tax, especially as you have mentioned, is growing at a very fast clip. Right now, as we speak, there is a growth of about 20%. The reason, as I was mentioning to you even earlier, is the use of technology and the use of third-party data. So we have hundreds and thousands of other third parties, the banks, the financial institutions, even, the large insurance companies, traders, those who are dealing, in property, the registrars of property in various states. All of them are feeding into the database of the income tax, telling us who the people are, which are the people who are spending, which are the people who are earning dividends, who are earning interest income, and this information is in turn also being made available to the taxpayers. And the taxpayers are then willingly paying those taxes, having been supplied with that information. So, and the GST, integrated GST along with the digitization, as I mentioned again, that is also acting as a big source of data for the income tax authorities, and vice versa. This data is available even to the GST authorities, and that again, helps them in tracking those people who are trying to evade taxes.
So reading between the lines of that a little bit, it is possible then, because all of this data is now becoming available, that part of what we are seeing is a one-time correction. Maybe people who are trying to stay out of the tax net or were avoiding taxes or just not paying up, not filing their returns, they're now feeling that there's no choice but to come into the system. There's that formalization, if you like, and that's why we're seeing this particular buoyancy when it comes to personal income tax. Would that be a fair conclusion?
Absolutely. The buoyancy is absolutely, because of the formalization of the economy, the digitization of the data, the digitization of the various systems that are in place. And this is helping us in improving the tax buoyancy, not the growth rate itself, because the growth rate is dependent on two factors. One, as to how well the economy is doing, and the other, how well we are able to collect those taxes, the efficiency part. The third, of course, is tax rates. We are not, talking about tax rates. So as the economy grows and as, it becomes more formal, more efficient tax collection, that is what leads to our tax buoyancy being higher than what the GDP growth is.
Right. Mr. Vinodha, one last question to you. You've done a very interesting thing in the interim budget, which is waive a lot of old, small dues, 25,000, 10,000 rupees, dating back 15 years, 20 years. That presumably cleans up the system and gives a lot of people relief. That's an interesting measure. Is this something which you might consider doing more of to sort of incentivize honest taxpayers, reduce harassment, and get a lot of old things off the system?
Absolutely. The effort of the government has been to simplify things for the government, for the taxpayers, so that tax compliance becomes easy. There's one such measure. I mean, I can go on and on. There's number of measures, that government has taken. Take the case of corporate taxes, which was simplified. We did away with, with exemptions and deductions, reduced the tax rates. Similarly, on the income tax side, reduction of tax rates along with simplification, monetary limits, for appeal, so that there is tax certainty beyond a point, for lower values of tax disputes. The government doesn't go in appeal in higher forum. All these, help in improving the tax certainty. And this is again, one such measure. And one can certainly, look for more such measures which are a win-win, both for the government as well as for the taxpayers.
Right. Mr. Nageshwaran, last question to you as well. When you look at the roadmap ahead, a lot of reforms have been done, but it's obviously a process that you, I'm sure, would like to continue to keep going because it's paying dividends, it's getting a certain results, it's getting the reforms. What would be some of the unfinished items on the agenda that you perhaps think can be taken up in the full budget in, in July and in the years ahead? What would be the top items on the unfinished agenda list for you?
It's not so much unfinished agenda as a continuing agenda, because it's not as if the government hasn't been investing in health and education and skilling, etc. But those are the areas in which we have to concentrate, because we have to ensure that the young India is also a healthy India, and some of the habits of Western consumption, such as aerated drinks and junk food, etc., should not lead to obesity and other complications, which should prevent them from being productive. And then the new education policy is held out as a very important policy intervention, even by Pratham, which comes out with the annual State of Education report, which measures learning outcomes. Therefore, implementation of the new education policy in consultation with state governments is critical. That is why the Honorable Finance Minister in her speech did mention that achieving policy consensus in consultation with state governments, other stakeholders, is an important reform plank going forward. And then more importantly, no country has become economically more developed without a vibrant micro, small, medium enterprise sector, which also got a mention in her speech. And then lastly, I would say It's about creating the capital markets that would be able to finance India's investment needs as it progresses from lower middle income to middle income and upper income status. And then the energy security, and to some extent the scheme that was announced for rooftop solar is not only to give an incentive for the middle class, but also to continue on the path of energy security for India, which is very important to ensure economic growth, and then move on later towards successful energy transition. These will be the important policy priorities in the next 20 to 30 years.
All right, Mr. Anantha Nageshwaran, Chief Economic Advisor to the government, Mr. Sanjay Malhotra, Revenue Secretary. Thank you both so much for speaking to us on Sansad TV. We're going to take another break right now. Be back with a lot more just after that.